Well, good afternoon, and welcome again to another edition of Stay at Home and Brew It. I'm Jeff Perot.
And I'm Brock Torringa.
And today what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you about the idea of moving from extract brewing to all grain brewing. Now, a lot of times when people come in, one of the first things they'll think of is, you see all the stuff around here and all the different malts that we have and stuff like that, and they think, well, I just need to go all grain. I mean, that's the best thing. That's what the professional brewers do, and so that's what I need to do. But is necessarily extract beer bad?
Oh, I don't think so at all. In fact, I think it can be very, very important to learn how to extract brew first. I mean, a lot of guys right now too have some extra time off, and I've gotten a lot of calls here at the shop about I'd like to come and check out some equipment and start brewing. And we have some fantastic kits to get you started. But I started as an extract brewer. Is that how you started, Jeff?
Yes. In fact, I did extract brewing for probably about a good 2.5, 3 years before I ever went into the all grain area.
I did as well, and I think it's really important that you do that, and we're going to go over some of the reasons why that it's important to stay in that. And not only that, but great beer can be made with extract.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, that's sometimes a mistake that some people make. They think, well, just because you're doing all grain makes it a better beer. Not necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of little things that go into making a beer a great beer. And it's not just the ingredients. Sometimes people say, well, it's just the ingredients, but it's not. It's more than that. And I would say probably one of my earliest, but probably one of my most important and beneficial things that I bought as a part of my brewing was temperature control.
Absolutely. And if you look, if you're a brewer, if you're out there, you can almost look, is a brewery doing this? If the brewery is doing this, you probably should be doing it to your beer as well.
Yeah.
That's the reason we have professional commercial beer that's fantastic. There's also some great home brewers out there as well. I've had very good beers here in the shop from some of our own customers as well. Kind of before you get to that though,
sure.
Maybe if you could just explain a little bit kind of the difference between extract and all grain.
Okay, sure. So one of the principal differences is that with extract brewing, what has happened is somebody's already gone through the process of taking the grain, cracking it, taking the extract from it, so extracting the sugars from it, and then there's actually two types of extract. There's liquid extract and dry extract. And both malt extracts are ones that can be used to make really good beer, but somebody has basically extracted the sugars from the grains and then either boiled it down to a thick syrup, which is extract, or I've gone through a complicated process of turning it into a very dry but yet very shelf-stable.
Dehydrating out the rest of the water.
Powder.
So the DME and the LME is relatively the same thing. One just has less water in it, would you say?
I would say one difference is the DME, you can go a little bit lighter in your color of your beer. So like the Pilsner DME or the Pilsen DME is actually very, very light in color. And can be is still even lighter than any liquid Pilsner extract that I've seen. So I mean, you could still make a great, very pale colored beer with the Pilsen DME.
No, I think that's a good point. I'd like to explain too. All of our extract kits are actually kind of a mini mash thing. So generally, an all grain brewer will have a very small percentage of his grain bill is going to be a specialty grain. Everything else is going to be this base malt. We've kind of done that same thing in our extract kits. We've taken just the specialty grains and we put them aside as a steep at that that wonderful temperature that unlocks all the sugars and the enzymes at 148 to 152. Generally, you're going to steep these grains, but all of that base grain that has been done for you by the maltster, and that just so instead of having all of this grain to extract your sugars from, a DME or LME is going to be your other portion of your grain bill.
Yes. And I would say what also happens with extract brewing is that you will have it's a little bit of a shorter process, because since someone has already extracted the sugars from the grain for you, you're already starting several steps ahead. So that can be kind of nice to do. But whereas with all grain brewing, you're taking those base malts as well as the specialty grains, you're mashing them at certain temperatures to extract certain sugars from the grain, and then you go to the boil stage. Whereas with the extract, you're mixing the extract, whether it's liquid or dry, into your your hot water that you've steeped grains in, and just going for the boil pretty quickly.
Yep. It takes a lot less time to extract brew as well. I'd like to note that as well. And again, you can make some really, really good beers. I think there's some things we're about to go over with you that you can do to improve the quality of your extract beer. And I would say, recommend to me a few things to do before I would go to this all grain. So say I've brewed for a certain amount of years.
Okay.
Some things that I really need to know before I step over to all grain.
Okay. Before stepping over to all grain, I would say you need to make sure you understand sanitation through and through.
Very good.
And that you've got a good process of sanitation from, the moment your boil finishes and you're chilling, all the way to the point to where you're serving.
Absolutely.
So,
And our it's always 2 steps. You have to clean and then sanitize, right? So
Correct.
Organics and microorganisms, right?
Yes.
2-step process every single time.
So you're wanting to get all of the stuff that can be in there, whether it be little bits and pieces that can get caked on into your fermenter from the fermentation process to
So a brew clean or a PBW. Now, what would you say too? Because there are some out there that say that they can clean and sanitize in 1 step. Have you ever used any of these?
I used 1 step for a short time. I did not find as great results as I did with PBW and Brew Clean.
Mm-hmm. Brew clean.
Yes. And then for sanitizers, I've used for a long time. I've used Star San or Aces San is a good one too.
Yep, absolutely. But I would do those steps. Even if I was going to clean, or if I was going to use the 1 step, I would clean with the 1 step, and then I would go ahead and sanitize afterwards, just as a final step.
Yeah. But I would say sanitation down. Also, have some sort of temperature control for your fermentation. That was one of the biggest differences I noticed in my beer that took what I thought was a pretty good extract batch and made it a great extract batch of beer.
Okay, absolutely. So a fridge or something like this, if we can do that. If not, maybe just even at ambient temperature, if you can keep it in a cool place, in a dark place, somewhere where that temperature is not going to rise and fall. We want kind of a steady.
Correct.
If we can't control our temperature.
Correct.
Right?
And if you want to find out more about temperature control, you can check out one of our previous episodes where we've talked about controlling your temperature and some of the methods of doing that and making beer. But I'd say also another thing is make sure you have familiarity with starters.
Very much so.
Knowing how to make a yeast starter, being very familiar with it, and being able to do it without it being very clumsy.
I think we've spoke to the yeast starters before a few times as well, and then we have a great video on that out there if you're interested in going into a wet strain. That was with Stubby actually, and it's a really good video.
Yeah. Now I would say also another thing is finding a way to make sure you can aerate your wort very well. So oxygenating it well. I mean, get some of that down before you make the leap to all grain.
Yeah, all of these things are just good steps in which you are going to also do once you get into all grain. But if we can do that while we're extract brewing, exponentially, I think our quality of our extract beer is going to go way up.
Oh yeah. And then, okay, let's say though we got all that down, and you've taken those steps, and you're like, all right.
I've been brewing. I know I want to go all grain. I've heard that I can get a lot more control over the just by the amounts of grains that I can put in. Let's do this.
Okay. So one of the big things with all grain brewing is, you got to realize it's going to be quite a bit of an investment in equipment, because you're going to have to have some extra stuff rather than just your kettle that you were boiling stuff in and a few things like that. It's going to involve more equipment, and therefore it's going to be a bit of an investment. Now, there's a few different directions you can go. One direction is to go the direction of having like a 2-vessel system, or even just a brew in the bag.
Okay.
Now, 2-vessel system would be having a mash tun and basically your boil kettle. And a lot of people will start that way. Like that's actually what I did. I had a big kettle.
It's exactly how I started too.
Yeah. And we have kettles here for sale. You can actually see them, and we might show you a kettle here in a second. But I started out with a 15-gallon kettle, and I took a cooler and turned it into my mash tun, one of those big 15-gallon got coolers.
And you can do that for relatively cheap. I think you can get started that way. Another really, really cheap way to get started is the brew in a bag, because then you only need a 1 vessel. You just need a kettle that you can put this in. Now, I've never brewed brewed in a bag myself.
I have not either, but I've known a lot of people who've had really great results. Stubby was talking about it earlier that actually they did brew in a bag a while back and won first place at our local homebrew competition, the Bluebonnet Brew Off here.
Yes.
And so they did very well. But for those of you who aren't real familiar with it, I'm not hugely familiar with it, but a brew in the bag, you have a huge nylon mesh bag. We've got them here. This one is 24 by 26. And all of your grains are going in there. Your specialty grain, your base grains, all of that stuff is going in there and is going to be mashed, basically. And then at the very end, it's all lifted out.
Yep, absolutely. And I think you just sparge over the top. I don't know if you need something that's going to hold this bag while you sparge, or if you can do that on your own. I've never done it, so.
I haven't either.
I built myself a mash tun, and we made fantastic beer in the plastic cooler.
Yeah.
In fact, I think tomorrow's episode, we're going to show you guys how we can build some mash tuns. So.
Yeah, and I've never done the brew in a bag because there's a number of times I've brewed by myself, and I mean that's a lot of sack to try and hold up.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So the brew in the bag, is an option too. But the mash tun, which we'll be talking about tomorrow, of how to build your own mash tun. So you tune in if you want to find out some details about that. But then also the question comes of, okay, well, what size of a kettle do I need? And my thought would be you need a 10 to 15 gallon kettle if you're going the all grain direction. But what do you think, Brock?
No, absolutely. We started again. We
$20 more for like a 15 versus.
Yeah, it's really
Okay.
not, and it gives you a little bit of room in the 15 that you don't have in the 10. You can always add a little bit more grain that way as well, so you can make a little bit bigger beers, or if you're into doing Belgians or something like that, it's nice to have that extra space in that kettle. And as Stubby pointed out, it's not very much more to have that, I think.
Yeah, the difference in cost between a 10-gallon kettle here and a 15-gallon kettle is all of about $20. So that's a good investment. Yeah. So that'd be about the size of a kettle you would need. Now, so the two-vessel system is one which a lot of us, I think, start out with, and is a good one.
I started with a plastic cooler, and I did it that way, and then I got into step mashing a lot. So I was like, okay, how am I going to step mash? I've got this plastic cooler. I'm usually at one temperature. So I actually bought 2 of the kettles with a false bottom in there, and that way I was able to raise that temperature in there. And it works exactly the same way, but I have that 2-vessel.
Okay.
That's what it becomes.
Another direction you can go is the 3-vessel system. Now, a 3-vessel system is you have one vessel for your mash tun, another one for your hot liquor tank, and another one for your boil kettle. Now, some of you may be thinking, okay, what's a hot liquor tank? I didn't know we were distilling here. Do I need to run to the store and grab a bunch of Jim Beam, or what's going on here?
So hot liquor is just what us brewers call hot water. So what's nice about having a hot liquor tank is that you can bring that up to temperature that you would need for any purpose. So I'm able to bring that hot liquor tank up when I'm about to go sparging, and we're going to go over some all-grain brewing terms here in a little bit as well. But actually brewed probably the most I've ever brewed on a Sapco system, which was a 3-vessel rim system.
Okay.
Very, very nice system. Brewed some really, really nice clear beer on there. And I like to have that hot liquor tank if you have that option available to you. Of course, now our equipment is getting more and more, which means our dollar value goes up more and more as well. If you ever thought about getting into brewing, which I suggest everybody, it's a fantastic hobby. But it can be, it can take over your life. So
It can, which is another reason to start out with the extract and see how you like it for a while. For me, like I said, I was doing it for about 3 years before I made the leap to all grain. And then as time goes on, I've collected pieces of equipment. Now, sometimes I've had people over and they look and they're like, holy mackerel, I can't afford to start like this.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't start like that. I mean, I've got a 3-vessel system. It's a Herm system.
it's taken you years,
Oh, yeah.
and you've collected and you've brought in, and as you've brought these things in, the quality of your beer has probably increased as you've learned things along the way too. So you had mentioned Herms
And rims.
yeah, and I've only ever used a rim system, so we
Okay.
probably should tell the folks a little bit about the difference between the two.
Okay. So Herms stands for Heat Exchange Recirculating Mash. And rims,
It's a recirculating infusion mash system. I believe that's what it is.
very good, very good. So what these do is these are 2 different ways of maintaining the temperature of your mash. So the Herm system, what that does is it pulls out the mash.
Stubby, can we get
liquid.
a Herms coil on the?
So it'll pull out the liquid from your mash tun. So it's pulling out the wort, and
Can't just throw it here.
Don't toss it. So the Herms pulls it out. It pulls. You use a pump to drain some of the wort out of your mash tun. You run it in through a water bath in your hot liquor tank, and then it
So
runs it back in.
I've got this big kettle, right?
Correct.
And inside of that kettle, I have this coil,
Yes.
right? And as your wort recycles through here, it takes the temperature from that liquid that's surrounding that, right? And that's how you control the temperature of your mash.
Correct. So it will absorb the temperature. So your wort absorbs the temperature from. There's a little bit of a heat exchange that takes place. Absorbs that heat, and then it comes back into your mash. Now, an advantage of that is you don't have to have an insulated mash tun. You can actually adjust the temperature pretty easily and do step mashes and things like that. But then you can also do that with a rim system.
So is it difficult though to adjust the temperature of that mash from your water? Because you have to have the volume of this, especially in
Correct.
bigger, if you had 15 gallons of water or something, that's gonna take a while to heat up or cool down.
And it can. I mean, it's not real fast, but I mean, you can adjust it pretty without too much difficulty. I mean, it's usually, and I think with mine, I can usually adjust it with a couple of degrees within about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
So-
All right. So with the rim system, we just have taken this out of our hot liquor tank, and instead of running it through that coil, we're actually going to take it out of the mash tun, the ladder tun, and we're going to run it by an electric heat element. So it's just like a tube that's got this big element in there, and that runs through there, and that way you can kind of adjust that temperature a little bit digitally, generally. Now, some of the problems you can run into is if there's not enough room in that rims tank, or if you get that too hot, you can kind of scorch some grains that are moving through there.
Yeah. My buddy Nick and I, when we were brewing, he has a rim system that he uses, and we had that problem when we were making a Hefeweizen that it got a little too hot in there, and suddenly our Hefeweizen started to smell like asparagus. That's not good beer.
Not good beer at all. I have found though that the simple use of some rice hulls and this and that to try to limit that really works well.
Okay. So you've got those two types of systems. Now, there's another direction which actually, I'm trying to remember, when did some of these all-in-one systems start? Has it been about 5 years? 2016, 2017, okay. So within the last 3 to 4 years, there are these all-in-one systems that have come about. And they're actually nice ways of making the leap to all grain brewing without having to do all the extra equipment. Stubby's showing we actually have a few systems here that we have that are kind of all-in-one systems. There's the Grain Father. We also have the Anvil system, I
We
believe,
have
over
the
there.
Anvil, Mash and Boil, and I believe a Robo Brew as well.
Okay. Now what these do is you mash it inside of it, and then you're able to pull the grains out. You boil in it, you chill, and then from there you transfer into your fermenter. And these systems range anywhere from about $400.
Usually $350 to the Grain Father can go up to $1,000.
Okay.
Now
That's
there
the
is
10 gallon.
there is a
Grain Father.
the 10-gallon Grain Father, right? No, it's a 6-gallon, right?
No, the 10 grand, the $2,000 one is the 10 gallon grain.
Right, which they just came out with for bigger batches. Now, actually, it takes me a long time to brew on my rim system. I'm talking about all day, and I've got tri-clamps and I've got all kinds of things. So by the time I'm done cleaning that mess and getting it all ready to go for my next brew, I'm talking an entire day of brewing. Now I can brew 10 gallons on it. It's a fantastic system. I can control all of my temperatures. But I find I can do the same thing too. I bought this little Grain Father unit, and I think it would be good for, especially if you have a space issue or something like
Correct.
that. So if I'm a guy that's in an apartment and I want to do an all grain batch, what's nice about this Grain Father is I can sit at home, I can do that batch, I can do it right in my kitchen, I can watch some football while the guy is going, I can make myself breakfast, and I can clean up pretty good. So.
And it does connect by Bluetooth, so
It does, and actually I was kind of skeptical about that at first. I'm like, okay, so it connects to Bluetooth, but what's really nice about it is I can set it all up the night before. It's got a start delay on there, so I can put in my water volumes and it'll actually be hot by the time I get out of bed
Okay.
and ready to go. I can just mash in, and then if I'm doing any step mashing again, it'll automatically do it for me. I can set up my mash schedule. It'll rise that temperature up. It'll keep it there for as long as I want, and then rise it again, and then
Yeah.
for my mash.
Now, fess up, Brian. Have you ever started the mash from bed?
I absolutely
Have you?
have. Yeah. So I usually when I brew, I'll do that, and I'll set my mash water to start about an hour
Yeah.
before I get out of bed.
Okay.
That way, hey, when I get out of bed, it's like, man, that thing's
That's pretty
cooking
good.
and it's ready to go, and I'll just dump my grains in, and my brew day is like that.
That's pretty good.
But so it does work. I was skeptical as well, but I enjoy my little electric unit.
So that is actually a good way in order to move from extract to all grain, is to go within one of these all-in-one units. They're much more compact. They can sometimes in many ways be a little more economical.
Disadvantages?
I don't know. I mean, what would you say would be some disadvantages, Stubby? Any?
I don't know, I love them.
Okay.
The one thing I would say is on the grain father, the advantage of going within one of these all grain systems, if people want to go straight into all grain, I think that's a great way to start.
Okay.
I think so too.
Because otherwise, if you're going to do other methods and stuff like that, I think it makes it a little more difficult. So these systems, I think, if people just really want to go all grain first out of the box, I think that's the best way.
Okay.
I've had pretty good luck with mine. Now, when they first came out, I think they had some problems with heating elements and stuff like
Okay.
that. But they have a lot of them have taken good steps to kind of to weed out that, and they've
Great
come out
service, too.
with pretty good units. Absolutely fantastic service.
Yeah.
Any problem, at least with the Grainfather. I can't speak to the other ones, but everyone that I've known them had an issue with it. It's been replaced.
Well, and I've talked with some people who've used the mash and bowl from Brewer's Edge and some of those, and they've had great results with the beer.
Absolutely.
So that can be a great way to go, especially if you're like as Brock was saying, you have space issues, or if you're a little intimidated with the idea of buying 3 different kettles and doing all of that. And building it yourself. And some people really like a lot of that, and some people would rather just get something that is a little more, all in. One unit, and I bought it, and stimulus check will buy you a Grainfather.
Absolutely will. I considered it cheating at first, but I don't think that it really is.
No.
Because I think there's really something to learning the art as well, though. I think that learning these processes as you go, and why is this that we call this, and why do we do that step, and I think it's important for these brewers as they get into all grain to really take that as something that's important. It's important to me to make a good beer, and I want to know why. So I think that's a good thing.
Now, as we've been talking, there's a number of things we've mentioned. We've explained some of the phrases that we use kind of as we've been going along, but there's a few that we haven't explained. Like, we mentioned a couple.
Some brewing ease.
Yeah, some brewing ease. A lot of times, people can get a little intimidated because we start throwing around stuff like sparging and batch sparging, fly sparging, Vorloffs. We'll talk about lautering, efficiency, protein break, cold break.
Decoction, tannins.
Exactly, tannins. And suddenly, you're like, okay, I'm overwhelmed. Well, okay, we're going to take you through some of these terms and explain them a little bit. So, sparging.
Yeah. So I've got this grain now, and I think actually before that we can talk about saccharification.
Okay.
So we say, oh, this is the saccharification rest, and even rest, protein, etc. Whenever you're going to do this, at some certain temperature, there's some enzymes inside of the grain. There's a alpha and a beta amylase, and they both they both convert starches into sugars at a different temperature, and a little bit different sugars too. One enzyme will unlock some sugars. We're not going to go that deep into it. But generally, a saccharification is going to be the process in which those starches are converted into sugars, and that happens at a certain temperature. Generally, at 48 to 52, I think is a good range just for saccharification. So if I'm not doing a protein rest, which is at a lower temperature, right, maybe 130, something like that, I think is where most of that protein rest starts setting in.
But it has nothing to do with taking a nap.
No.
No.
No, nothing at all.
No.
This
So
is-
don't think it's
This is not a rest.
no.
Although
no.
you have a little downtime during that, you can be
You do.
you can be sanitizing your fermenter and getting ready to go.
But basically, it's keeping your mash or allowing it to stay there to rest. So it's not doing anything else.
at that temperature,
Correct.
in Vorloft,
and Vorlauf, which Vorlaufing is a fancy term that basically means that you are moving the wort out of your mash tun and back into it. You're moving it from the bottom back up to the top. And what you do when you're doing that, or what you achieve when you're doing that, is you're setting your grain bed to act as a natural filter.
And not only that, during the mash too, we were also looking for a homogeneous zone of temperature between the top and the bottom there.
Correct.
So it's pulling that wort off the bottom and recirculating onto the top, and that way I can get that even mash temperature to the top or the bottom. Now, do I have to do this? What if I just have a mash tun? I don't have something to pour
Okay.
off?
You don't have to Vorlauf throughout the mash. I mean, like I've had a big Got cooler that I've used, I used for many years, and that insulates it and maintains the temperature within a degree or two.
Okay.
So in that case, you don't. But at the end of your mash, you do need to Vorlauf. So what you will do is once you've finished your mash, you need to begin to draw out the wort and pour it back onto the top.
Yeah. It's going to be really gristy and kind of cloudy at first too.
Yeah, a lot of little
before
chunks
that,
and stuff
before
in
that
there.
grain bed kind of sets. That grain bed kind of becomes its own filter.
Yes.
And we just take that off into a pitcher or something, smoothly and evenly pour it right back over
Yeah,
the
don't
top.
hold it 5 feet up in the air.
Yeah, that's our first runnings. Okay, there's another
That's
brewing
true.
term for you as well. So until that becomes very, very clear, I don't want to start putting that into my boil kettle.
Correct. Then once you've done that, you've been either using a pump to recirculate it up to the top, or you've taken a pitcher and been pouring it to the top. Once it is cleared, then you will drain off that liquid. Now, here's where we can go 2 different directions. Okay. Now, as you're draining it off, this is what's called first runnings, as Brock had mentioned earlier. This is the first sugars that are running off of your mash tun into your boil kettle. Now, at this point, you have 2 directions because we both you'll eventually move to sparging. You can do either batch sparging or fly sparging. Which one do you normally do, Brock?
I usually fly sparge.
Okay, see, I batch sparge.
Do you? Okay. So, and the difference between the two is this. With batch sparging, we're going to, as I understand, we're going to let all of that runoff, that extract, come out of there before we start to sparge, correct?
Yes.
So with fly sparging, what it's going to be is I like to leave about 2 inches on top. And I'll just recirculate from my hot liquor tank, or if I have, my hot liquors ready to go whenever I start sparging, I'll keep that about 2 inches on top. And I find that works pretty good for me.
Correct.
Drawbacks?
I don't know. I think a lot of it comes down to personal preference.
I think so.
I will say that I mean, if you're fly sparging, you need to watch to make sure that you don't start pulling out too much, and then you can start getting a lot of tannins in your beer.
Yeah, so when we start our extractor, we're just going to want to open that ball lock nice and slow so that we can have that we want to extract so we've taken this time now, we've done this mash, and we want to extract as much of the sugar from that grain as we can possibly do that. And I think another thing is efficiency, right? So efficiency in our mash. Everybody's like, oh, what was your efficiency?
100%.
Yes, hopefully you can always get 100% efficiency. Just not the case. It's just not going to happen. Some of those sugars are going to be left inside of the husk in that grain. But we were speaking to efficiency in the mash. That's what we're talking about. How much extract are we able to extract from there? And again, in our extract batches, that's already been done by a maltster.
Correct.
And so that base malt is just there for you. What else do we have here?
Okay. Let's see. We also have
What is loudering?
loudering. Because we use the word. Or did we talk about a louder ton? Mash louder ton?
I think I said something about loudering, but I'm
Okay. Loudering is basically rinsing or washing your grains. So it's it's the same thing as sparging, has always been my understanding, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a sparge vessel. So whenever we look at the brewery, right, most of the breweries that you find for monetary value is a 2 vessel, and they'll have a mash tun lauter ton, right? Generally, a mash tun is going to be just a big kettle that has an interpeller in the bottom, and it's going to move all of your mash around so that the outside of that grain can be surrounded in water. Now, a lot of guys will do that in the same vessel as they do the Vorlauf and the collections in there as well. So your lauter ton is actually going to be just that process. Your mash tun is going to be the other process. And then on the other vessel, they're going to have a boil and a whirlpool kettle as well. The little bit nicer ones, they can separate that out. They'll have the mash tun, they'll also have a lauter tun, and then they'll have a boil kettle and a whirlpool kettle.
Okay.
And the reason they do that is you can wear that out. So I can have something doing collections, right, and my lauter tun, I can be sparging in that lauter tun while I'm mashing in a beer at that same time.
Okay.
Because it's going to take a while for that collections to happen. And I've learned from a brewer who was like, the slower that we can do these collections, the more efficiency we're going to have. And I found that to be mostly true. If you open up that ball valve all the way and all of this water comes out, I think that's the reason that I never batch sparged.
Okay.
That's what I've heard is, all of this is going to come out and it's going to leave a lot of that sugar behind in there.
And I've had pretty good luck with batch sparging. So I mean, basically,
Well, we make great beer, man.
Well, thanks.
We're drinking right here.
Yeah, thanks. I've had really good luck with it. And one of these times I'll have to get into, and we'll have to talk about this before we do it, but my buddy Nick and I have actually started doing no sparge brewing. And that's been an interesting little
Okay.
thing
All right.
to do. But
So you just take, volume-wise.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
We have big kettles now.
Yeah, okay.
But that could
All
be
right.
for another episode, perhaps. But let's see, another term which people will use is stuck sparge.
Okay, all right.
Now I've heard that, and that's one of those things as a brewer. If you talk to brewers about stuck sparges, everybody wants to avoid a stuck sparge. Now, a stuck sparge, basically what that is have you ever had a stuck sparge?
I have. It's a nightmare. It's
Yeah.
absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it's one of these things in which, especially if you're using a lot of grains that do not have a whole lot of husk, then
Adjuncts and such. Flaked, anytime you use anything flaked.
Yeah, or wheat.
A lot of wheat in your grain bill, something like
yeah,
that.
and a stuck sparge, you're getting nothing coming off of it, or just a trickle at
Yep.
best. And basically, it turns into like a block of
And why
cement.
does that happen?
A lot of it, the reason it happens is because with all the sugars and stuff that are kind of going on and being extracted from the grain, the husks of the grain help to act as this not only a filter, but then also kind of spaces everything out a little bit. And so it keeps everything from sticking together like concrete. I mean, you got all this stuff that's basically sugar.
Yep.
And it can just become this big mass of,
We get these gelatinous proteins and
Yeah.
stuff from a lot of the flaked adjuncts and that sort of thing too. So an easy way to ensure that I don't have a stuck sparge is
a couple things. But most important is rice holes.
absolutely.
Rice holes, what actually rice holes are, is rice holes they're
Just a husk.
Just the husk of the rice
Rice.
kernel. And you put these in your mash, and these ensure that if you're using a lot of adjuncts and flaked grains, things like that, you won't have a stuck sparge.
I'm just adding an extra filter really here.
Correct. We actually sell quite a few rice holes. Lately, here we've had a lot of people buying rice holes, and
Yeah. Who needs 10 pounds of rice holes?
I don't know, but we've had some orders for 10 to 20 pounds of rice holes, and if y'all are out there and you're ordering those, if you could let us know.
How are you using them?
Yeah,
we
we're-
just
we're
want to
very
know
curious.
why somebody needs 10 pounds of rice holes. Although there's been a run on rice holes, so you might want to run out and get you some.
Yeah, but we've got lots, so don't panic by it now.
And you mentioned another reason I might have a stuck sparge. What are we talking about here? Are we talking about head pressure in there? Are we talking what would be another reason?
Another reason I've seen also is if I've seen people who have some sort of recirculation of Orloffing they're doing during their mash, and they're pulling it out too quickly.
Okay, so pressure in there
Correct.
builds up, or maybe is even sucking some grist out of the bottom and getting clogged in their system somewhere.
Yeah, and it can clog your manifold down to your bottom, which we'll go over what manifolds are tomorrow when we talk about building your own mash tun. But yeah, it'll just muck up all in your manifold, and it gets.
Or even into your pump if you know.
Mhm.
So there's things. It's a nightmare though. What else do we have here? Let's talk
let's
about
see.
protein break.
Okay.
I think generally on protein break, we're talking about our on our grain itself. The level of clarity in that malt. Your protein break, if it's really high, you're going to get, whenever you do your runoff, you're going to get a very, very clear extract. If the protein break is a lot lower, you're going to have a cloudier looking extract. Does that make sense?
Yes. And then cold break is a term that we'll sometimes use too. Basically, I mean, that is when you are in the midst of chilling your wort. This, of course, after your boil and everything is finished. And what'll happen is a lot of those proteins will begin to just fall to the bottom. And you'll see it get incredibly clear, which is, the temperature, is there a certain temperature it happens at?
I'm not certain. I just know that when you get to the end of your batch, you're going to see all of this protein gunk really
Yeah.
in the bottom. It's just like a gelatin-looking kind of a thing, and
Yeah.
that's your cold break, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having
No.
that. We're trying to keep most of that out of the fermenter.
Correct.
If we possibly can, and especially if I've got a plate chiller or something, I want to try to filter out as much of that before I can cool that beer.
Let's see.
Decoction? You want to talk about decoction and pH?
Decoction and pH? We can.
Should we get into
Decoction's a lot. Or we could actually probably do an entire
Talk about
episode on
that. Yeah, let's do an episode on it.
Okay, but in short, decoction is a way of adding more melanoidins, more of these kind of interesting flavor compounds into your beer, and we'll do another episode about that
Yeah,
because I think it's deserving of its own episode.
Again, if you guys have any questions about any of this stuff that we had talked about, and also I did see a question about, I've got these extract recipes, I want to go to all grain, how do I convert them back and forth? So maybe just touch on that a little bit. I think there are a couple of really good ways. Any of us here, we can work with you, but we would prefer for you to use something. Beersmith is a really great program that's out there. I think you can get it for somewhere around $20-$30 and have it. I still make all of my recipes on Beersmith.
Yeah, I do too.
That's just how I put them together.
And I think, I'm not sure if they still do it, but Beersmith for a long time would give you a free 21-day trial. And so you could download it on your phone or your computer, and you get a free 21-day trial for it. And it's worth the money. Brad Smith is the gentleman who came up with the program, and he did incredible work with it. He's always doing updates, and it's a great program. It's worth the money that you invest in.
Absolutely, and there are a few other programs out there that you can use as well, but that's going to help you. That's going to help you, I think, convert your extract to all grain. Now we do have some tables on our website as well that can tell you even between LME and DME to the amount of grain that you need to have, and that's a really great tool right there. So if you're, if I've got 10 pounds of or my pills in DME that I want to convert, that chart is there available for you so that you can know exactly how much grain that you can start with.
Now, we did have a question. Robert asked, can you discuss the interaction between pH and mash efficiency?
Yeah, so generally we're not going to have to worry about that too much. Testing your pH is another step. Like we had talked about, all these steps that are going to make you a better beer in the long run. However, having a normal pH to your mash will absolutely give you a better extract ratio.
Yeah, if your pH is off, I mean, it can get to a point to where you can start extracting tannins, which tannins are not good.
Now, have you ever had a problem with this with normal water? Say I live here in Fort Worth or something like that.
I've not had any problems with pH yet. Have you?
No, I've never had a problem with the pH, and we used to have some great little testers and stuff. Very difficult to test your own pH, but there are some out there in which you can get an idea. Again, without a lab or some real equipment, that's very difficult. Now, I will tell you, what is the
5.2?
The iodine test to let you know if you're in that range.
Yeah.
You just take a little bit of your mash. Was it iodine blue or some other iodine reagent?
Yes.
Have you ever used any of that?
I've heard of it. I've not used it.
I haven't either. I know that some of the pro breweries will do stuff like that just to check every once in a while and make sure. Not a huge problem. I've always gotten really good efficiency as long as my rest has been proper, my temperature has been proper. That has been really good. Now, we do carry a product. It's called 5.2, and that is the preferred mash pH. And I don't know how that works. Is it something you sprinkle into the mash?
Yes, you actually would stir it into your mash.
I'll
You gonna go
grab some
one?
here.
Okay. Yeah, I've used the 5.2 before, and it's a powder that you actually stir into your mash to maintain your pH at 5.2. And Brock's actually grabbing some, so he can tell you a little bit more about it. But I've not had a huge problem with pH, at least here.
I don't know where Stubby's at here, but
Okay.
I don't know. Can you see that, Tyler?
Yeah.
Right there?
Yeah.
Okay. And now, what do they recommend here? You said you've used it,
Yes,
so you put this right into your mash.
right into your mash.
Okay. So, Robert, this might be something that you would want to try if you're having some problems with the water in your city. Also, you could probably treat your water before your mash, but generally, the enzymes in that grain are going to get you pretty much where you need to be for your efficiency to be spot on.
Oh, and Robert said about the iodine is for noting when conversions taking place.
Okay, fantastic. You're right. Yep. Yep. Thank you, Robert. We
Yeah.
appreciate that.
I also use the finger test. If it's a little sticky,
Yep.
then you've got conversion.
Then you've got conversion. There's sugar present.
There's sugar present.
Absolutely.
Let's see, any other questions that we had come in?
No, I think that's about.
Okay.
I think that's about it.
All right. Well, I'd say overall, for any of y'all who are thinking about going all grain, make sure you've done extract for a little while. If you're just dead set on jumping into all grain real quickly, these all-in-one systems are a great way to go. I would say before you go into all grain, again, make sure you've got a lot of your process down, have temperature control, understand your process, yeast, oxygenation, and things like that before you even make that leap.
And again, there's nothing wrong with doing an extract beer. In fact, I've judged BJCP for a long time, and sometimes it's very, very difficult when an extract beer is done well to even tell the difference.
Yeah.
Between the two. So.
Yeah, I've had people say, "Oh, well, I can taste the extract twang," they'll call it.
Yeah.
And if it's really well done, temperature's controlled well, your whole process is good,
That will go away.
it does go away.
Yeah. Now, I would say that, but by far, though, I think you do have a lot more control over your all grain. There's so many malts to choose from, so
Yeah.
many variables that you can use in there, where that's not always the case. You have an amber, you have a golden, you have a pilsner in the extract. So there's a lot more versatility, I think, in the all grain, which is a lot of fun. And you have a lot more control over the over what you're extracting from this grain.
Correct.
Excuse me, and through your rests and that sort of thing that we talked about. So, Jeff, anything else to add?
Not that I can think, so,
Again, I just would like to thank you all for all your orders that are coming in, and thank you for being so patient with us here at TBI. We're doing our best to get everything out to you. Thank you for continuing to allow us to speak to you through these short casts, and we have a lot of very, very capable people here. If there's anything that you have a question about on any of the products or kettles or just a random question, you can call us. Any one of us are here to talk to you.
correct. And tomorrow we'll be talking about building your own mash tun. Brock's gonna bring in his mash tun, and Michael's gonna bring in his, and we're gonna talk about different ways to build them. And if anybody knows why rice hulls are so popular,
Please let us know.
please let us know.
The question we're all dying to answer. So I would say stay safe and stay at home and brew it.
All right,
Thanks,
cheers.
guys. Cheers.
Thanks.